And that brings us to the analysis of Shields and Brooks. That is syndicated columnist Mark Shields and New York Times columnist David Brooks. Hello to both of you. So let's pick up on Yamish's reporting, David. All this comes after President Trump has been going after Congressman Elijah Cummings, going after Baltimore, calling it rat-infested. This just a few days after he went after 4 congresswomen of color, the Squad. Some people are saying the president's being racist. He says, I'm the least racist person in the world. How do you see it, and what are the consequences?
I think I disagree with the president on that one. You know, you just look at who he's attacking. It's one African American or one person of color after another. It's not dog whistle anymore. It's just straight up human whistle. And so it is just pulling at this racial thing over and over and over again. And I don't know how much it affects people. I really don't know. I know people don't like political correctness, and when he does that, I think people really get a charge out of that. But going to clearly racist tropes goes well beyond it. We're walking into Father Coughlin territory. We're walking into George Wallace territory. We're walking into very ugly territory. And if this is what this election is going to be about, then it becomes, I would think, hard for people of conscience, whether they like Trump's economic policy or not, to wind up with him in however many months Election Day is.
Ugly territory.
Ugly territory, Judy. It reached the point where when it was reported that Congressman Cummings' house had been broken into, the president tweeted, "Too bad." Elijah Cummings, the crime in Baltimore. This was too much for Nikki Haley, the former South Carolina governor, former UN ambassador, who said that this is, she took the president to task. Republican, as did Congressman Adam Kinzinger of Illinois. You know, the president, you think of the founder of that great party, the Republican Party, words of Lincoln, with malice toward none, with charity for all, let us bind up the nation's wound, the task we're about. You know, this is just the opposite. I mean, this is salting the wounds. This is sowing division, and all for very narrow political purpose. I do think it reaches a point of diminishing returns, because at some point you're just not proud to say you're for Donald Trump. You could say, oh, he's my guy, or he fights my fights, or he's on my side. But Americans want their president to be a comforter-in-chief and a consoler-in-chief, as Ronald Reagan was at the Challenger crisis, or in tragedy, or Barack Obama was after the Charleston church shooting. I mean, that's what a president, to unite, to comfort, and to bring out. He's the only voice that can speak to us, all of us, and for all of us. And he obviously does not want to speak to all of us or for all of us.
But David, you still have, as you heard in Yamish's reporting from Ohio, people saying that they don't think it's racist, that they like the fact, as you suggested, that he speaks out.
Yeah, well, they do like that fact. The one thing I've noticed, I was at 2 conservative conferences over the past month, and they were pretty Trumpy, I guess, and they were 95 and 99 and maybe 100% white. And so if you're in conservative worlds, you're just not around minorities anymore. You're not around people of color. And then you say, well, shouldn't you get some, you know, people of color on stage just to hear viewpoints? And they say, well, we don't want, like, I don't see color. And if you're living in this country with the culture of this country and the history of this country, you've got to see color. And you've got to affirmatively try to get different people in the same room. And it's just become a habit on the right to not care about that. And this was not always the case. And this is how Trump is influencing the party, and frankly, how the party is influencing Trump. In the world, in the age of the Bushes, in the age of Jack Kemp, there was really aggressive efforts to try to diversify the party, so with some success. And now that's not even tried. And it's not only Trump, it's up and down the whole apparatus.
And last night, Mark, as we have reported, Will Hurd, the only black Republican in the House of Representatives, announced he's not running again from Texas.
He did, Judy. I think it's the 7th this week, 6th this week, 9th overall.
Total of 9, yeah.
And I think there's a couple of factors at work. I mean, what David mentions is one of them. The Republicans are becoming increasingly a white party, and Will Hurd was former CIA professional and a high qualified person. But prior to his retirement, or announced that he wasn't going to seek re-election, Susan Brooks of Indiana, who's been tasked for seeking women candidates for the Republican Party, and Martha Roby of Alabama announced their retirements. And I think what's significant about it is this: Ronald Reagan's last term, half the members of Congress who were women were Republicans, 12 out of 25. Now there are 102 women in the House of Representatives. 89 of them are Democrats. 13 are Republicans. 2 of those 13 have just announced they're retiring. I mean, so you see, it's a white male party, and that's a finite demographic.
So you're both talking. What are the consequences of this, David? I mean,
well, of course, I think electoral ruin. Though people have been saying that for a long time, and there was a book called The Emerging Democratic Majority that was probably 15 or 20 years ago from John Judas and Rudy Teixeira, who took a look at the demographics that were Republican, and they were all fading. And they predicted Democratic reign by now, and that hasn't happened. And that's because a lot of Latinos, as they assimilate, they become white. and so they're voting Republicans, and whites have swung overwhelmingly to the Republican side. It's a short-term boon, like the country's 76% white. But it's a long-term catastrophe, and that's just talking politics. It's a short-term moral catastrophe for the party.
But in the short run, Mark, this could be good politics for Donald Trump.
It's hard for me, Judy. They're maximizing a minimum. I mean, is what they're doing. There's not an expansive ceiling on the Trump coalition. It means getting every possible Trump voter out. There's no persuasion. It's all an organization effort. They're not reaching across the aisle and saying, we want to get you, come join us, we agree on 80%. I mean, this is just mining down is what it is.
Well, there was some diversity among the Democrats running for president this week. They debated on 2 nights. There was diversity, but there's also some division, David. We saw, I think, a clearly ideological divide between the so-called moderates, the so-called progressives, the liberals in the party, and in the eyes of some, a more critical, personally critical debates than they would have liked to have seen.
Yeah, if you want to get your moment on TV, you got to attack somebody in your own party pretty roughly. And so that happened. My main takeaway was that Democrats don't understand what this election is about. We just spent a few minutes talking about Donald Trump and racism. That's what this election is about. This election is about Donald Trump and what kind of country we're going to be, what the values of our country are going to be, what the atmosphere is in which we're going to raise our kids. And Trump is a cultural revolutionary. He's not a policy revolutionary. And he will make this election about him every day with his tweets and whatever. And he has a values campaign. He says he wants a certain sort of masculinity, a certain sort of country. And to me, it's up to, you can't beat a values revolution with a policy proposal. And so they need to talk about values. And they need to tie it to policies, but say, I'm for kindness, I'm for diversity, I'm for honesty. And the only person who seems to get that is Marianne Williamson. And because she's not just trying to run a purely economic campaign, she at least gets it. She's got wackadoodle ideas on other things. But I think what she says about that and what she said in the debates is exactly right.
Mark?
Marianne Williamson.
Marianne Williamson.
Okay. I finally knew David would come over to the Democratic side. I didn't realize Marianne Williamson would be the catalyst to bring him. Judy, I'd say the debates contributed to the destruction of overconfidence on the part of Democrats going into 2020. They were sobering. They were unsettling. Since Franklin Roosevelt was elected some 76 years ago or more.
And I didn't cover that one.
I didn't. I was doing youth for Roosevelt. There's been one Democrat who won a popular majority of the vote in 2 successive presidential elections, 50 plus 1. His name was Barack Obama. To see these candidates, especially those on the liberal side, distancing themselves from Obama and highlighting Obama's imperfections. Obama was not perfect. He was a public servant, not a perfect servant. But, I mean, he achieved great things for the Democrats in terms of the Democratic objective and the Democratic vision. The idea that David's right, they're running against Donald Trump. I think part of the problem that Joe Biden has is that Joe Biden is remembered for 2 debate performances, and rightly so by most Democrats. In 2008, he crushed, not surprisingly, Governor Sarah Palin, the vice presidential nominee chosen by John McCain. In 2012, he took on the cover boy of the Wall Street Journal editorial page, the favorite son of the American right, Paul Ryan, and he vanquished him. And unfortunately I think for Biden, he's being compared in some Democrats' minds to those 2 sterling performances, which are now at 12 and,
Do you think
8
people
years ago.
focused on that?
I think there's a sense of, is this the same guy who was so good in 2012 and 2008? And he was in both of those.
But where do you see the race right now?
I still think Biden is the front runner, and how long it'll be. But if you're the front runner, people are going to take a lot of shots at you. And people took a lot of shots at him. And this time he was fine. He was fine. And so if you're the front runner and you survive without any change in the race, that's good for you. And so this was good for Biden. There were some people who moved up and down. Cory Booker probably moved up. Kamala Harris probably moved down a little. Warren probably moved up. And so there's little ups and downs, but I wouldn't say the race has been transformed by these debates. And Biden has a pretty solid majority, even though Twitter hates him, but he's still in the lead. And it's a fragile lead, but it's made stronger by the fact that no alternative moderate has emerged. Amy Klobuchar, or
Alternative to Biden.
None of those have yet taken that role. And so if people want to be not Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, where do you go?
But what do these candidates need to do more? I mean, David's saying they need to talk about values. They need to talk about what Donald Trump represents and speak.
Well, I mean, I think it is. You identify where you want to go by how you view where America is and how we got here. And I think the Democrats can claim the American narrative. I mean, we are a people who came from all corners of the earth and overcame enormous obstacles, and we have forged into one people. And Lord knows, I mean, it's taken the blood, sweat, and tears of all generations of people. I guess where I would perhaps, I do differ from David, is I think there is a strong spiritual, almost religious chord to the Democratic story. I mean, there is no abolitionist movement in this country without religion. There is no anti-war movement without religion in its ranks. There is no civil rights movement. And the Democrats can claim in all 3 of those.
And you think they're talking about that?
I think that you say, this is who we are. This is what we've done. This is what we've achieved. This is where we want to go from here. Rather than get into Section 11A of 14B of your 23rd point program, which I think just takes all the music, all the romance, and all the spirit out of politics.
But David, in 30 seconds, they're mainly talking about health care. And
yeah, that's because the 2 big idea generators in the party are Sanders and Warren, and they're very wonky, and they're very materialistic, and they're not particularly spiritual. And there are some people in the party who, of course, they detest Donald Trump, but you get the impression their main enemy is the Obama mainstream, and they want to have that fight, and they want to have that fight as the way to get the nomination. And so that's why it's gotten so nasty so quick.
Listen to Elizabeth Warren's speech to the Push conference. It was highly religious. It was on Matthew 23, and it was quite spiritual.
Last words, Mark Shields, David Brooks. Thank you.